Yes.
What is the meaning of? It's a sentence. Some people still having some hiccups. It's about some issue. Is it?
Hiccups.
Yeah.
Say yeah.
So it's not the normal one.
Well, it's a metaphor.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, we've introduced a new student enrolment system. And at the moment, it's still having some hiccups.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. So what do you think that means?
Up and down. Okay.
Alright, there are some moments where it doesn't run smoothly and sort of unpredictable interruptions and yeah. So just a metaphor. Yeah.
Sometimes they say, what about your fussy hiccup force?
About your what?
About your fussy hiccup force.
Fussy hiccup.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
Say that. What all about your fussy hiccup force? Maybe put something in.
Did you get my email?
No.
Okay. No, I sent it to you, edited version. Alright, which you'll need fairly soon. Well, alright, Kate first, then the break, then Marley. Alright, you need to get in the break. You've been to the dentist?
Yeah.
Oh my god, that was well timed. Yeah, you'll be alright.
I think the break maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that's no good. Makes it hard.
It's not. I
Yeah.
Can I
Sure.
talk properly?
No, go luck.
Thank you very much.
You can tell your left side of your mouth is not moving.
So you're having a really good day, Marley. Dentist and oral
I'm
presentation.
going to party tonight.
Right? And I was going to say, it must be your birthday as well.
Yes, it's the best. That's mine.
Oh.
Mine was first of August.
Okay.
It's already gone.
You're very excited.
Okay, critical thinking, guys. Let's do.
Yes.
We did number 9, didn't we? Loaded words. Just too emotive. I'm going to write that word up again. Not emotional, but emotive. It has a negative meaning, like too emotional. So we often have this collocation. Emotive language.
So it's only used the negative.
Can only use negatively. Yeah, it's too emotive. Meaning it's emotive, too much emotion. So it has a sense of too much. Yeah, now we looked at lethal. These strong words. There are some others. Good practice in analysing words and their impact. What other words are emotional here?
Adore.
Yes, adore.
Doesn't deserve.
Yeah, doesn't deserve, right, yeah. It's this idea of deserve, doesn't deserve this treatment, yeah. Now that could be put some other way, couldn't it? It's not appropriate or whatever. But deserve carries a lot of emotion, yeah. So the verb carries emotion.
Lost the best.
Yeah, exactly. Till their last breath.
Respect the
Yeah.
the last breath.
Not until their life ends, but until their last breath. Now that's interesting, because why is that more emotional than till the end of their life? Demonstrates an important point about language. Why do we get more feeling out of that? Till their last breath.
Means he will pass away anyway today, tomorrow, but we have to respect them till the last breath, to the last day in their life.
Yep. Well, we could say until they die, or the last day of their life would have that sort of effect, I guess.
Last breath means precise to the last second.
Yeah, true.
Last minute.
Exactly,
in
yeah.
their life.
We have this very exact sense, don't we, about when they die. Now, the point here is, it's related to what you're saying there, Hannah, I think. You know that word image,
Image.
something you see. Now in language, we talk about imagery, just the general category. So some words have a lot of imagery. We see a picture. Or, so a good novel, a good story should have really strong imagery. And not just visual. It might be taste, touch, smell, somebody describing something, cooking on the stove really, really well. We can almost smell it. Or we can hear it. Good writing. Now that's fine for fiction. And we expect it and we want it. Here, strong imagery, this is what helps carry the emotion, isn't it? If we just said till the end of their life, we don't really get a very strong picture. But till their last breath, we see the hospital bed, the white sheets, the oxygen, don't we? The machine going beep, beep, the relatives with candles, the whole thing. And that's much more emotional. That's a really important point, because sometimes if you're wanting to write convincingly, you're not in an academic context, put imagery into your writing. Write with what we call very concrete imagery, collocation. Concrete, not concrete like floor, but concrete, you can taste, touch, smell it. And if your language has a lot of sensory imagery, collocations, it's usually much more powerful and it can move people. I mean, this is in any language, not just English, it's a general principle. So we'll keep our eye on this principle, and when we're reading we might see other moments in other writing where you get these strong sort of moments of imagery, and what is it doing and how is it helping the point. So you can still do it in academic writing, just don't make it a really emotional imagery. It's actually good in any kind of writing to write in this very concrete way. Academic writing is often very abstract, that's why it's kind of often a bit boring, because it doesn't bring us down to earth and we don't feel it's part of our real life. So the more you can bring it down and give the reader examples, great, but just don't pump it full of emotion. So it is a good tendency in writing. But here it's overdone because of the emotive element. Alright, religious instruction at school. What did you think there?
Irrelevance, I think irrelevance.
Irrelevance? Yeah. There is at the end. Therefore, religious instruction should be compulsory in schools. It doesn't really link, that conclusion doesn't follow from the earlier, what we call the premises, the earlier points. So there's this gap, logical gap. Also, anecdotal evidence, isn't it? I mean, the claim is most of the world leaders understand the Bible or Quran. Is that likely? I'm not so sure. There's a lot of countries in the world that aren't necessarily Christian or Islamic.
As you said, anecdotal evidence have to be the personal opinion, anecdotal evidence? No,
anecdotal evidence simply means it's a true story. But it's a story of one person. So we've got anecdotal evidence here, so the claim is most of the world leaders understand the Bible and Quran. That may be true, I'm just doubting it, but it could be true. If we had statistics, one way or the other, we could tell, couldn't we? We get all the prime ministers and presidents, depends what you call leaders. Are we going to measure all the ministers, like the cabinets in every government? How do we define leaders? Then when we do, is there a survey showing their religious connections? That's what we need to back up that claim. There's nothing there. So it's an unsubstantiated claim. The attempt at substantiation, at proving it, is one story. Tony Abbott. It's really inadequate, isn't it? We can find one example to prove anything just about. So that's why anecdotal evidence isn't very effective.
What is the fallacy?
The fallacy is it's anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal, true story. One true story. It's about Tony Abbott. He became a priest. So he studied to be a priest. Does that prove that most of the world's leaders have learned the Bible or Quran? Absolutely not. It's inadequate, isn't it? Not adequate. The other point, as I said, was unsubstantiated claim. most of the world's leaders understand the Bible, Quran, not necessarily. Could be true, but we have no figures there. Yeah. And then, you know, again, connecting the story with a kind of conclusion. This tells us our leaders actually learned Bible, Quran. No, it doesn't. One example doesn't tell us this at all. And even if it did, let's imagine it did. Let's imagine it said 96%. Therefore, religious instruction should be compulsory in school. Well, okay, here's a hidden premise. There's a hidden premise, there's a missing link in this argument. And that is that the world is a really good place and the leaders are running it really well. The leaders have learned religious instruction and therefore religion should be compulsory. Okay? So can you see why that's a key? That's what the person is assuming, isn't it? That there's a necessary assumption. If we're going to get to that conclusion, you've got to assume that the world, as we know it, run by the leaders, is actually good. Otherwise you wouldn't be advocating, saying that, well, the leaders are doing a good job, and part of the good job was the fact that they were trained religiously. Now, so there's a hidden premise. It's not stated in there, but that person is assuming it. We bring it up to the surface and have a look at it. What do you think? The hidden premise is the world that the leaders are running is they're doing a very effective, put it this way, they're doing a very effective job running the world. What do you think? Who would vote for that idea? That they're doing a good job running the world. Anybody? I mean, generally speaking, the world's in a bit of a mess, isn't it? Many places. So, there's a problem here. That hidden premise, really, is pretty easily disproven. All we have to do is look at, you know, most of the Middle East, pick whatever you like, climate change, on and on. There are lots of problems. So, we can't conclude that, therefore religious instruction should be compulsory. They're doing a pretty bad job. If it were true that they were all trained religiously, I'd be questioning, you know, the role of religion in that process. It may not have been the thing, but it could have been the thing that's causing the mess. It's certainly not adding to the proof.
On that last bit, can we say it's appeal to authority? Because it says should be compulsory in school.
No, it's not an appeal to authority. Appeal to authority is where you use somebody who's an authority in the wrong area to prove your point. So no, it's not doing that. Alright, so there are a few problems with that one. 11. Aspen. Well,
Voted for an anecdotal evidence.
I can't see any anecdotal evidence there. Where's the single story about an individual? I think it's the opposite. There's a lot of statistical evidence here. So there are various claims. It's a little bit like, see number 2. It's on the same topic, isn't it? About Aboriginal people and their status, economic status. And I think it's in strong contrast to number 2 because he argues there's discrimination. Okay, that's not too loaded. That's a neutral phrase. It's obviously negative, but it's academically, you know, acceptable enough. It's unsubstantiated. Well, is it unsubstantiated? I don't think so, because he says, here's his claim. Unemployment was almost 3 times higher.
But it's talking about the poor Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal Australians. But
yeah.
the reasoning, the evidence is just the males. The males 3 times.
He's just got male, not with the first group. Not with the first claim. Aspen claims that unemployment amongst Torres Strait Islanders was almost 3 times higher than non-Aboriginal. That doesn't mention males. The second point, the second bit of evidence, he mentions males. Right? But the first is 3 times higher. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Yeah, he does, I see what you mean. Yeah, that is a repeat, isn't it, but with the detail. So it is the same claim. It is only males, true, so you could say, well, it's partial evidence only, but at least it's substantiated to some degree. We would have to be careful. What I think, James, your point's a good one. We have to say, what about females? Has he cherry-picked? Why has he only got the data from males? Maybe the data from females didn't prove his point. So, question mark, we can't say he's cherry-picked. We'd have to go and look at Aspen and check out the details of where Aspen got the information. But my point, I put it in because I thought it stood in contrast to the earlier ones where there were claims that were not substantiated. Here, at least, there are figures to back up the claim. Fair point, read, only males, question mark, we should call that. What about currency? Old, isn't it? I mean, all of these things were gathered about 2 or 3 years ago. A couple were more recent, but it's too old. Things could have changed a lot, since 1996, 10 years or so. Okay. Any other points we want to make about or anything else on that page?
It couldn't show that discrimination, how discrimination is related to unemployment rate.
Yeah.
It couldn't show any.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I guess I would argue, and lots of social scientists would argue that if you find a group that's got very high unemployment compared to others, there must be what we call systemic discrimination going on. It may not be, I don't like you, you're Aboriginal, but more, what we call systemic. It's just in the system, lower education rates, poverty, etc., many factors discriminating against them. But yeah, it's a fair point to raise that, and you could dispute that. It does get disputed. Okay, over the page, we won't do these now, but let's just have a look at them. So we'll do these pretty soon. Shall we have a read? Dilhani, read the first one, please.
There are suspicions that availability of abortion will lead to irresponsibility and
promiscuity
with a resultant devaluation of marriage. The law must be involved in abortion decision as it is to end or not to end a potential human life.
Yeah. Promiscuity, having lots of different sexual partners. Promiscuity. 13, Nimika.
However, studies have evidence that potential donors are concerned about giving their organs to alcoholics, criminals, or undesirable people because they hold their own responsibility for the failure of the organ.
Good, thanks. Yeah. 14, Lita.
Does Islam
Sanctifies, approves of.
honor killings? For example, according to Downs, a Sydney Muslim man threatened to murder himself and his daughter after he found out she had a boyfriend. According to World Diary Daily, a Muslim stabbed his wife when their daughter embraced Christianity.
Good, thanks. Yeah. Just that. Threaten. That's it. Threaten. That's it. Got it. Lynn, try 15.
Needles exchange program might have a great and acceptance in the collective subconscious that negligent
Illicit, meaning illegal, illicit drugs.
illicit drugs are not a major issue in this country. For example, recreational drug use is on the increase in Australia.
Good, yeah. Alright, so that one, and 16, James.
For example, promoting gay marriage and lesbian. What's
Horrendous, like horrible, horrendous.
what horrendous news is this? Majority in this community doesn't support this kind of action, and this is still the major problem being raised by some of the religion leaders. It has demoralized and weakened religion policy.
Yeah, there's a few English issues there, but if we look past them, what's the problem with the thinking? Okay, that'll do. Have a think about those. Overnight, we'll tackle them
Before
tomorrow.
going to it, may I ask
Yeah.
you, John, about the number 11? What kind
11?
of
Okay, earlier on, yeah.
what kind of policy is this? Is this unsubstantial?
Well, no, I didn't think there were too many problems with this. I was putting this in because as a kind of a good example, especially compared to number 2.
So
Same topic, but one's substantiated and one's unsubstantiated claims. But as James pointed out, there is only male data, so you could put a question mark over the fact maybe the data was cherry-picked because the female data didn't support the argument. You have to explore that. Maybe the person could only get the male data, we don't know. So
this is not,
So, no,
false.
not really. Question mark over cherry picking could be. Can't
I
tell.
see.
We'd have to explore it more. And that's why referencing is important, isn't it? Because if you think, this person's cherry picking especially, you've got to go back and look at the original data and see what people selected. And then if the female figures don't help the argument and they were there, then yeah, there was probably cherry picking happening. So,
The sentence you said there are errors.
in that last one, yeah, sure. Do you want me to correct the whole thing? Okay, let's go back to 16. For example, promoting gay marriage and lesbianism. We need an ism there. It's not even a sentence by itself either, is it? Because there's no verb, there's no finite verb. You need a finite verb. Promoting is a non-finite verb, doesn't make sense. What horrendous news is this? Now, that's a question. Put a question mark at the end. And I can't remember if I've covered this with you. I think I have. Don't put question forms in academic essays. I mean, it's emotional, isn't it? What horrendous news is this? Just that question, you could put, this is horrendous news. Now that is still emotive, I'm giving you some clues here.
Yeah.
Horrendous is very strong. It's very negative, so it's a loaded word, okay? But if you put it in the question form as well, you kind of double up the emotional intensity. Those sorts of questions, where the person isn't really asking a question, they're using it as an emotional technique. It's got a name. Rhetorical question. That's a rhetorical question. It's not a real question. The person knows the answer, at least in their own opinion. That word, this is important. Rhetoric. Rhetoric is what we've been studying pretty much all this term. Argument. When you try to persuade somebody, rhetoric, persuasion. You're trying to persuade somebody, that's argument, isn't it? And remember Aristotle, logos, ethos, pathos. That book he wrote, where that came from, is called Rhetoric. Because the Greeks were very interested in looking at how you persuade somebody. Why were they interested in that? Because they were the world's first democracy, and about 30,000 men, not women, ran Athens, first democracy. And so, politics was a very lively, everyday thing, lots of people involved. So, lots of thinkers arose And schools arose about how to convince other people. It became a very strong part of culture. And that's why we got a lot of study from that time into argument. And most of the fallacies we're looking at were all identified back then by the Greeks. And they don't have Greek names. The Romans picked them up and gave them Latin names, and that's what we use in English. But most of them were discovered by the Greeks and Aristotle and others. But that word rhetoric, very important, like persuasion. So a rhetorical question is just a question with no, normal answer. It's just used to persuade you. It's part of the pathos element. So toss it out for your professional academic writing.
But we are not allowed to bring it in an essay.
Don't use it in essays, no. Yeah, so there's one problem.
How the person can think?
Just rewrite it as a statement. This is horrendous news. And likewise, it's quite common that people do this. Just think, if you've got one of these in your essay, just try to rewrite it as a statement. There is the double problem that horrendous is too strong, so you have to alter that word as well.
But we can use it in oral presentation to attract the emotion or to attract the...
Yeah, maybe. As I said, there's a little more pathos allowed, isn't there? A little sprinkling,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a little bit of chili, not too much. You'll destroy the curry, right? So you've got a kind of a budget of pathos, a little bit more. And how do you use that? It could be a bit of humour, it could be something to attract people at the beginning. But if you keep doing it through various tricks, it sort of all adds up to too much. So you can do it, you just got to be careful, and there's no ultimate, defining line. I would say, interestingly, with PowerPoint as a medium coming in and university lecturers presenting, they have probably injected a bit more, like pre-PowerPoint, my university days, sort of pouring on, writing on the board. Now, with PowerPoint, some people already have thrown in a bit of humour with cartoon or something. You've probably had university lectures where people inject these little moments of entertainment to kind of wake everybody up every 10 minutes. Those sort of things are pathos, aren't they? There's more of that these days, I think, than there used to be. Yeah.
And is that the title of the article? I just put the quotation mark inside the essay. It will be fine. Because I just say, I read the article, because this article's title is with the question. It's the question.
So the article's title is a rhetorical question?
A rhetorical question.
Oh, okay. Sure, if it's somebody else's and you want to use it just to refer to it.
Yeah, I put quote.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so just to correct the rest of this, the majority in the community. You can say a majority or the majority, you've got a choice. The is more common. In the community, it doesn't support this kind of action. And really it gets a bit tangled then, and this is still the major problem being raised by some of the what's the problem with the religion leaders? Religious, yeah, it needs to be an adjective. Religious leaders, which has demoralised and weakened, ed, religious policy. There are quite a lot of errors here. So, on the number 16. So, and this is still the major problem being raised by some of the religious leaders, which has demoralised and weakened, ed, religious policy.
Being raised is passive?
Yeah, that's right. It's a passive continuous, isn't it? Being raised, correct. Alright, so we're not really focusing on the grammar side of things, but that one's fairly tangled, so it's worth straightening it out so you can just think about the thinking.
Because we worked on it.
Because
we spent a few minutes on it.
Yeah.
We learned the grammar now. it will start.
Yeah, it'll help.
It will help.
Sure. All right, so think about those for tomorrow, and we'll move on to